And I'm going to tell you about technology beyond 2020 and how it's going to make a completely, going to change the world in ways that we don't even fully understand. Now, just to introduce myself a little more fully, I'm from a company called Future World. We're a small global group, and what we do is we try and help companies and organizations like yourselves, business leaders, to understand the changing world and to make sense of it. And we've worked with business schools, universities all over the world, including WITS and others, but also in other countries. And we've also published a number of books. And if you look on the screen, you'll see that there's 2 Chinese versions of our top-selling book, which is 10 Lessons from the Future. And the one Chinese version is the official version, which after we published it, it was sold for about $40 US. And next to it is the pirate version, which apparently sold for about $2. So we figured if the Chinese are pirating us, we must be doing something right. We also published something called Mind Bullets. Now, Mind Bullets is a little news story from the future. It brings you a scenario, an idea, something that might have happened or might happen in the future. It's got a future dateline. And the idea of Mind Bullets is just to get business leaders to just think differently about the future and what the business opportunities might be like. And I'm very fond of Mind Bullets because I'm the editor. So what I've done is I've pulled up an example of a Mind Bullet here because I'm going to be showing you a few. I'm going to use some of them to illustrate my talk. And here it is. It's a little news story from the future, and the headline is, "Send your phone into space. Homemade spy satellites are all the rage," and it's dated in 2015. Of course, we wrote this a couple of years ago, so it was a little bit futuristic. And people said, "But no, that's a crazy idea." Sure, it was a crazy idea, but last year NASA sent 3 Android phones into space to test this kind of a idea of low-cost microsatellites. So even our crazy ideas are not totally crazy. And we also have a blog on our website on Future World. We call it Futures Forum, and anyone who's interested in these things of the future, be they technology or politics or social development, can go on to Futures Forum, sign up, and you can also post your own comments and items of interest there. So our journey today, we're going to look at, first of all, the power shift, this great change that's happened in the world. And Walter talked about it, the world changed at midnight. I call it the world after midnight, and we're already living in the world after midnight. And then I'm going to look at the 7 technology megatrends that are really influencing the way the world is changing, and in the future, how it will change even more dramatically than we can imagine. So it's about power, all right? So we are going through the greatest power shift that mankind or human people have ever seen. The world has never seen a shift like this. And what's happening is that power is shifting away from the institutions, away from government and banks and authorities and even universities and any other kind of institution you want to mention, the courts, the stock exchange, whatever. Power is shifting away from those institutions into the hands of the individual, the connected individual. And when we're talking about the connected individual, we don't only mean those yuppies with their laptops and their MBAs and things like that. We mean everybody, because everybody is now connected. So what's happening is that the power vested in those institutions represented by these buildings is shifting into the hands of the people that they're supposed to serve. And that picture, of course, is from Occupy Wall Street, which makes the point. And this creates new challenges for us as business leaders and business people, and new threats, but also amazing new opportunities. Let me give you an example. So what's happening is that by being connected, we can not only mobilize and organize, and we can also do things completely differently. So this is a car rental business in Paris, in France, called Autolib. All the cars are electrical cars, and they're parked at the street, plugged into a power socket to keep them charged up. And when you want to use one, you just check on your smartphone app where the nearest one is, and you walk up to it, slide your credit card through the slot, unplug the car, and away you drive for a couple of hours. And then you bring it back, plug it back in, and slide your credit card again, and you get your receipt. Just think how that has changed. You don't have to book with a car rental agency. You don't have to sign any contracts. They have 150,000 people on the Autolib network, and they have 10,000 rentals a day in Paris alone. So this is what we call when access beats ownership. You don't have to own the car to use it. You just need access to it. This is what we call platform economics, right? If you've got a platform, Even the platform doesn't have to own the vehicles. And we've seen examples of that with Uber, which I'll touch on just now. And how about a platform for currencies? This is Bitcoin. Now, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme or whether it's really going to change the face of the world. Who knows? The future is unpredictable. But the point is that Bitcoin is a currency that's entirely virtual. It is not created by a government. It doesn't have any real value. The only value it has is the fact that it can be used as a means of exchange and perhaps as a store of value. And it will only work if people continue to trust it and use it as such. But it is completely virtual. It's actually generated by the network that creates Bitcoin. If the network falls apart, Bitcoin will cease to exist. There is no central authority. And so we published this Mind Bullet recently saying, in the future, maybe companies like banks will find that they've been taken out by Uber or by an Uber-type business, a platform that is now have an internet of money. Imagine if you had an internet of money where you could borrow and lend and operate without using the banks at all, without using the government. Bitcoin is possibly a platform that could evolve into that. And I take it you're all familiar with Uber, are you? No? Yes? Okay. So the point is that Uber doesn't own any motor cars. They don't own any taxis. They don't pay any drivers. They're simply the platform that allows the customers to connect to the suppliers of the service. So getting into our mega trends now, the first one is ubiquitous connectivity, and we have touched on this. So the thing that makes all of these other business models, these new business models and these new ways of working, is the fact that people are connected, and literally everyone is. So we have now almost 7 billion, I think slightly more than that, mobile phone subscriptions, mobile device connections. That's equivalent to 100% of the world's population. Now, of course, not every single man, woman, and child has got a phone, but many people have got 2 or 3. So, in fact, there's more connected devices than there are people. But for many countries, you're looking at 85% or more of anyone who's kind of important to the economy being connected to the network in one way or another, even if it's just with a simple SMS. And that makes a very big difference to how the world works. And when we look at smartphones particularly, phones that can not only do SMS but can also do email and also connect to Twitter and all these other things, smartphones are probably the fastest spreading technology in human history. The rate of adoption of smartphones has been faster than anything else in the past, faster than television, faster than ordinary telephones, faster than anything else, smartphones. If we look at some of the more developed countries, we can see that they've got like 75% penetration of smartphones, not ordinary phones, smartphones. In Africa, you've got about 22% access to mobile broadband, but it's growing all the time. And by 2020, on average, globally, we'll have something like 90% of the world will have access to mobile broadband. That's how quickly it's growing. And of course, charts and graphs and numbers and percentages are all very boring. So what I've got here is a picture which kind of illustrates it. Now, in 2005, there was a new pope inaugurated, and this was a picture that was taken there of the pope being inaugurated. But 8 years later, there was a new pope, and here's the picture from that inauguration in the same place. Now, just look at that and tell me that smartphones and tablets aren't taking over the world. And the important thing about that is that all those devices that are taking photographs are connected to the web. They're not just like cameras that you take a picture. All those photographs and videos are going to YouTube, they're going onto Twitter, they're going onto Facebook, they're being uploaded to Google+. So it's part of that web of connectivity. So we've seen an absolute tsunami of technology in the last couple of decades, right? Who remembers the very first IBM PC desktop in 1981 with Charlie Chaplin as the advertiser? Okay, most of you are too young to remember that. And then we had the laptop, and today we've got the handheld device. I mean, these new iPhones are far more powerful than the laptop that I had in the year 2000. And in the future, of course, your computer will be basically invisible. It will either be a wearable device that looks like a watch, doesn't look like a computer, or maybe it will just be something like an earring that you clip on your ear. Or maybe it'll be so small that it'll actually be on a chip that's embedded under your skin, so you don't even see it, completely invisible. All of those scenarios are possible. And even today, we have the wearable devices, the smart watches, as they call them. We've got the Google Glasses, which, of course, are far more than just a means of taking pictures and so on. They feed you information, they connect it to the cloud, and you can interact in ways that you couldn't really do with a standard smartphone. So if you think that we've already reached the pinnacle of connectivity with everyone having smartphones and everyone's on Twitter and this is about as far as we can go, not at all. In the future, we might be able to communicate just by thinking about it, just by using our brains. Now, this might sound far-fetched, but if you look at the screen, you'll see this wireless headset is already in existence, and what you do is you put it on your head and then you train it. It reads your brain patterns, and then you train it so that it knows what you're thinking about, and you connect it to your laptop. And then after a while, you can move the mouse around the screen just by thinking about it. And then you can connect it to other systems like home automation systems. You can switch on the lights, or switch them off or open the curtains, whatever. In fact, I've seen a demo where a paraplegic person who can't move at all can drive a wheelchair, an electric wheelchair, through this headset just by thinking about it, forward, backwards, left, right. And it really does exist. So in the future, of course, we wrote this mind bullet for some time in the future. Your smartphone, or whatever we call them by then, will be perhaps as small as a little hearing aid thing that you'll stick in your ear. People won't even notice it's there. And it'll read your brain waves. So when you want to send out a tweet, about Walter or something, then you just think about it, and it'll go out, into the Twitter sphere. And everyone will be able to see what you're thinking. And of course, your friends will have these as well. So they'll be able to see what you think, and you'll be able to see what they're thinking, kind of like ESP, sort of, thought. The only problem, of course, is you have to remember to switch it off when you're having some thoughts that you don't want people to know about, And that's in the future, right? But it's already happening. Here's a new attachment that if you've got Google Glass, which lets you take pictures with a gesture or voice command, you can now get this little extra piece that sits on your forehead, and then you say, take a picture, and it takes the picture. So now when you're talking to someone and you want to take their picture without them knowing you're taking their picture, you just think about it. See? So in the future, we might have ways of dealing with our communication, with our data that we need in our daily interaction in ways that we can hardly imagine. What if we could bring all that data from Google Glass and bring it into our bodies virtually through contact lenses or some kind of retina implant or something like that? Imagine if you had all that connectivity at your fingertips and you wouldn't even have to use a device. It would just be there for you. Now, when you went out for a blind date with someone you have never met before, of course, you'll get all the information from their Facebook profile and all the rest of it, right? Google itself is looking at ways for contact lenses to interact with your body on an intelligent basis. Just imagine how different the world would be if all that information was available and we could communicate just basically by thinking about it. So this brings up, of course, not only having everybody connected, but everything connected. So the Internet of Things is going to change everything again, because now it's not only people that are connected, it's appliances, it's objects, it's machines, it's even products, right? But the big thing that's going to happen in the near future is the cars are all going to be connected. So what might happen in a couple of years' time is you'll get an email. Dear Doug, I've noticed that my oil is a bit degraded, and I know the next service is only due in 3 months' time, but I've decided to move it up to next week. I've checked your schedule, and I've booked the service with the dealer. And by the way, I've already put a reminder in your Outlook calendar. Love, your car. Now, this is not beyond the bounds of possibility. The sensors are there, the intelligence is there. Cars are becoming smarter and smarter. They're actually going to have the power of a supercomputer very soon, and they're mobile. And of course, once all the cars are connected, the cars can talk to each other, so they can avoid traffic jams and accidents, and it'll also help us when we don't need to drive them, right? Now, the Internet of Things is already happening. It's going to be so much bigger in the future, but it's already happening, even in Africa. So e-tolls is part of the Internet of Things. Now, it's not a very popular example, but every time your car drives under there, even if you don't have an e-tag, it takes a picture of your number plate, and then it looks it up on the computer, and it sends a message through. This car was at this point at this time, and then it was at that point, that time. In fact, it's tracking your whole movements and feeding a lot of data to the system without any human intervention. That's part of the Internet of Things. Another example is in Kenya, where they have automated weather stations. That's that little picture over there. That's a little automated weather station, and that's connected in the network to the back office. So when you buy your seed, your grain seed from the seed supplier, you also take the optional insurance, let's say drought insurance. You check, I want the optional drought insurance. They send you an SMS which confirms your policy number. And then the automated weather stations, if they detect that during that growing period the rainfall was below the required amount, it automatically claims on your behalf and sends you the the notification that you're going to get a payout. You don't even have to make a claim. So, of course, they've discovered that that is much cheaper and more efficient to just automatically pay out those who qualify in the different areas rather than go through all the rigmarole and administration of making payments. Now, here's another example. So in the future, all the products, every single thing in the supply chain, every bottle of water, every product, every item that you purchase will have a little chip in it that communicates its position and its status and all the rest of it in the supply chain. But right now, you can do those things even before we have all those chips embedded. So this is a supermarket in Seoul, in Korea, and it's a virtual supermarket because that isn't actually a shelf of products, it's just a photographs, and the person walking through the door is actually going to go and catch a train. So this is in the subway, and the people walk in there, they're going to go into a train, and this is on the walls of the subway. They've got the photographs of all the groceries, and you've got a special smartphone app, and you just go and you just take pictures of the things you want. They've all got little QR codes on them, little 2D barcodes, and then you submit it, and it goes to the store, and then when you arrive at your apartment, of course, they just deliver your groceries to your apartment, and it's all paid for through the app by your credit card, whatever. So you don't have to worry about having to actually physically go and buy these things. It's a virtual supermarket, and it works pretty well. In fact, it's in Seoul, it's very, very popular indeed. It's run by Tesco. And in the future, we will have these tiny little chips, which they've recently developed. If you look at that, that's a little chip sitting on a US penny, a 1-cent piece, which is a pretty small coin. And that little chip is sitting on the penny there, and it's got Wi-Fi built into it. And it doesn't need a battery because it can harvest enough power from the Wi-Fi signals to power itself. So it can communicate with the sensors that need to know where this chip is, what its status is, and all the rest of it. That's how small and powerful these things are, and they're cheap to make. They've been deliberately designed to make them cheaper. Once they're producing them by the million, by the billion, they'll cost next to nothing. So they'll be embedded in everything. Every single item will have status on the Internet of Things. And it's not only the industrial and the supply chains and the commercial retail market. The Internet of Things is available to the average person. As I said, power is coming to the individual. So the Internet of Things, you can use it today. If you've got a smartphone, you can use the Internet of Things using this thing. Who knows what IFTTT stands for? No IT people here? It means if this, then that. And if this, then that is a web service that anybody can use. It's free. And you can go onto if this, then that, like you would go onto Twitter or Facebook, and you can create an account, and you can program it very simply to interface certain things with your phone, with your home, if you've got any of these connected devices. But there are lots of ways to use it. So, for example, you can go into if this, then that, and say, when I leave my house, it knows where your house is because it's got a GPS built in it. When I leave my house, turn my phone back off silent so that I can hear it ringing. When I arrive home, turn my phone automatically onto silent. Now, think how useful that is. You can do that today. One of my colleagues did that to his wife's phone because he got so tired of her forgetting to switch her phone back off silent when she left home. And you can program it very easily on the internet with these drag and drop things. You don't have to be a computer programmer, and it's free of charge. So this is just a taste of some of the things that are going to happen in the future. In the future, you'll be able to tell the monitor that you've got in your pot plant that when it's too dry, it must just tell the sprinkler system to start up and automatically water it, and that sort of thing. You can do some of those things today. Now, all of this connectivity and this Internet of everything is going to create huge volumes of data, big data, seriously big data. We're going to have a tsunami of big data because we won't only be dealing with connected people, we'll also be dealing with connected things. There are already, I think, twice as many, the number of connected things in the world, if you include all the phones and everything else, is double the quantity of the people in the world. So there's about 15 billion devices and various machines and systems connected somehow onto the Internet of Things. And Cisco reckons that in 5 years' time it'll be 50 billion. And ultimately we're going to be looking at trillions of data transmitters, little chips, little sensors. Once every product, every item, every chair, every table, everything has got a little chip connecting, telling it where it is and what it's doing and all that sort of thing, we're going to have huge tons of data, far beyond what we're seeing today. And of course, the challenge of using this data is, first of all, to make it useful and also to deal with it. So the challenge of data is not only how to store this data. Luckily, the ways we store the data has also advanced exponentially. So I'm sure no one can remember back to 1956. That was when I was born. But 5 megabytes was the size of a huge big air conditioning unit. You can see them loading it into the plane there. By 2005, you had 128 megabytes on the tip of your finger. Well, guess what? Today you've got 128 gigabytes, 1,000 times as much, also fits on the tip of your finger. The new iPhone comes with 128 gigabytes. That's just in the phone. So we have seen an exponential increase in our capacity to store and process data as well as produce it, and it's going to continue in that exponential way virtually indefinitely. Of course, the big challenge with big data is how to make sense of it, how to make it useful, because no one cares how many cups of coffee I drank today. But someone does care how many cups of coffee we all drank today. The people who do the organizing, the catering, the people who are putting together the things, people who are selling the different kinds of coffee, they really care about the aggregated data. And so that's where the next item comes in, which I call artificial intelligence. Now, under artificial intelligence, I'm lumping a whole lot of things: supercomputers, very clever software, different kinds of systems that can deal with data and make it useful to us. So what's happening is that we are creating supercomputer-type systems and very, very clever software that works in the cloud that can pull in all sorts of different things and do very intelligent kind of manipulation of the data. We call these cognitive systems. IBM built one called Watson, and they put it in a quiz show called Jeopardy, where the quiz master produces the answer, and then the contestants have to dream up what the question was. And the Watson computer beat 2 humans who were top Jeopardy players. It beat them. That's how good it was, actually, in making deductions, in coming up with ideas. Now, what happens in the future when you've got one of these clever computer systems and you tell it to go and read the internet, or to go and watch every movie ever made and educate itself? Just imagine, you might have a computer system that thinks it's a real person. Now, think how that will change the way things work in the world. But before we get there, we've got algorithms. And algorithms are what is shaping the way things work. If you go to Amazon and you buy something, it recommends you something else that you should be interested in based on what you've been looking at. It looks at your interests and it pulls together useful information. Same thing with these feeds that set up your own personalized news feed. It looks at what you're interested in, looks at what you've been clicking on, what you've been reading, who you're connected to, and it works out from that all sorts of things that will be useful to you personally. It's also very useful for businesses, for marketing, even for purchasing. By using algorithms, like I said, if you can aggregate the information about the coffee and the different coffee brands and the actual time of day and all that sort of thing, you can work out lots of very useful information for planning your supply chain, for having the right products in the right place at the right time, at the right quantity. So all of this industrial internet stuff will depend on this kind of algorithmic information, which the really difficult algorithms require very, very strong supercomputers to make them really work properly. And the interesting thing about algorithms is that they use a lot of our personal data. But guys like Patrick Tucker, who wrote a book called The Naked Future, he said, we should see this as an advantage, rather than an invasion of our privacy, rather than me worrying about people knowing how much coffee I drink and whether I'm going to become a health risk or whatever. We should rather embrace it because it adds predictability to the market. If everyone opts in to providing this data through all the sensors and ways that we can do it, then we get predictability. So we can cut out a lot of unnecessary cost because we've got predictability from the big data into our supply chains and various other things, marketing as well. On the other hand, there's a dark side to this, or should I say the flip side, to having all this mechanized, automated systems of doing data mining on a kind of a mechanized basis, is that the customer, the user who's now got a lot more individual power, as I said, is going to very quickly have high expectations that it can be difficult to meet. So, simply recommending what the algorithm thinks people will like is not enough. You really have to try and build a personal profile that really understands how the person thinks so that you can understand and connect with them on an empathetic level, especially if you're in the marketing business. So moving on very swiftly to the next megatrend, which is also in part made possible by these supercomputers, this artificial intelligence, and the data, which is robotics and autonomous vehicles. Now, when I talk about robotics, it's actually a huge, huge field, and I'll show you some different examples. But some of the more interesting robots actually do look like mechanical men, like this one over here. Google has bought up 7 different robotics companies, and one of them makes this robot called Atlas, which literally walks like a human and is very powerful, much stronger than a person. And obviously the military are very keen on those sort of things, but also other services like rescue services and things like that. But the field of robotics covers a huge spectrum. And one of the robots that are really coming to the fore at the moment are drones. Now, drones are basically just flying robots. And the military has been using them not only for surveillance, but also for attack. So you've got guys sitting in Texas behind a computer screen, and they're flying planes with bombs on them in Afghanistan by remote control. And drones can also be pre-programmed to go and, almost like a cruise missile, to go somewhere on its own and then come back all on its own without being controlled remotely. And one of the interesting ones is that little helicopter there. That little helicopter is called Little Bird. And it's an interesting drone because it actually has 2 seats in it. But the people who sit in those seats don't have to be pilots, because the helicopter can be flown by remote or by automated routine. Basically, the computer flies the helicopter, so if you're a wounded soldier, the helicopter can come and fetch you, and you climb into it, and it'll take you away. Fascinating things. And then, of course, we're going to see this coming more and more into the civilian side. So people are already using drones for TV cameras to cover sports events. And here on the screen, you'll see there's one on a farm. Now, that's a new technology or a new way of doing business that's starting up in the United States called precision agriculture. So you send the drones out to cover the fields, to map them and to check the different soil types and everything, and then the automated tractor, which doesn't even have a seat, because the tractor runs driven by a computer, and it's run by GPS. And of course, the tractor can plow at night because it doesn't need to see where it's going. It's being driven by GPS and computer. So you can actually have a fully automated farm with using drones and automated tractors. These are all robots to an extent. Now, here's a South African version of the octocopter, which this one has been designed by a South African company for riot control. So I believe one of the mining houses is interested in it. And the idea is that this drone will carry paintball guns at the bottom, and it can shoot paintballs to make marks on the guys who are being dangerous in the protests. And it can also shoot pepper spray if they need to. Much better than trying to shoot them with real bullets. Now, in the future, we might find that drones go beyond our sort of typical supply and delivery things. We've heard of Amazon and others who, DHL in fact, is already piloting some delivery service by drone in cities, so they're automatically delivered to your doorstep. But in the future, we might even have illegal uses. So we published this Mind Bullet a while back about drug running by drone. Now, it's quite an interesting idea, because if you could send 1,000 drones across the border in different places all at the same time, even the US border control might have a bit of problem with that. And more robots are future cars. Like I said, the cars won't only be connected. Most of them in the future will be electric, and of course they'll be driverless. So that's the Google car. There's actually a blind guy sitting in the Google car, and he goes for a drive. He can't see, and he doesn't even touch the controls, and the car drives him through the traffic, through the city. And those Google cars do exist. They have been licensed for use in a number of states in the United States, but currently the state laws still insist that a driver sits in the driver's seat just in case he has to take over. And of course, Tesla is producing the kind of driverless cars, or should I say the kind of electric cars, that are ideally suited to this, because they are connected all the time. They can be updated by software the same way as your iPhone is updated. They can update the car over the air via the connections. And Tesla has promised that they will have an autopilot within a year or two, that on certain highways the car will drive itself. So you'll put in cruise control, and not only will it keep the car going at the right speed, it will also keep it in the right lane, and you basically don't really have to drive until you get to the next exit. So in the future, we might see certain highways and intersections where humans are banned from driving. Why? Because the cars can do it much better. You don't need a traffic light. The cars can just merge, because they're all talking to each other. So the computer can figure out which car must go at what speed, and they all merge, and they can all follow very closely without having a bumper bashing. So then humans won't be allowed to drive there, let's say the central city of London or something, whatever it is. And that's definitely on the cards. I can see it coming within the next decade. I've got a little video of a driverless car. It's a very short one, but it's quite fantastic, because although Google pioneered the idea of the driverless car, the big car companies like BMW and Audi are working very hard on this, and they're doing some very interesting stuff. It's not only in the future that we're going to have driverless cars. We've already got these things working at the moment. So on the screen there, you'll see two situations. The top one is a mine in Australia. They have a fleet of these huge big trucks, you know, these massive things that you have to climb in a ladder to get up to the cab. They've got a fleet of them that have got no drivers. They run entirely by computer. They run 23 hours a day. They have 1 hour per day that they stop for checking and servicing, and then the other 23 hours of the day they run, taking the ore out of this giant open pit mine, because they don't need to see where they're going, they don't need light, and they're perfectly on spot all the time. And then the bottom couple of pictures is the container terminal at Rotterdam. The entire container terminal, from where they unload the containers off the ships onto these chariots. Those chariots are driverless. They're driven by computer. They've got sensors in the, underneath the tarmac, and those chariots take the containers to the stack, and they're automated cranes that then pick them up and put them on the stack. Fully automated. The only thing that is partially automated is getting the containers off the ship. They use semi-automated cranes with an operator just watching to make sure that everything goes in the right procedure as they unload the ships, and the rest is all automated onto the stack. And as I say, they go quite slowly, but they're very efficient, and they don't go on strike either. Now, here's an interesting robot, because this is a robot that is partly a driverless car and partly an industrial robot. And what this does is they're using it at Düsseldorf Airport. They've only just started it, actually. And so you drive up into the special parking bay, and you get out, and you take your ticket, and the robot comes and collects your car and moves it into, it's like valet parking, puts it in the back somewhere. You don't even have to worry about where it is. You know, if it's in bay number 273, you don't care, because you just arrive at the welcome spot. And then they connect this through the Internet of Things to your flight schedule, so that when you confirm that you're coming back on that flight, then the robot will go and fetch your car, so that when you come out of the terminal, there's your car waiting for you. Just climb in and drive away. Very, very useful indeed. And that's the kind of application that we're going to see in the future. So all of this automated stuff brings us to the next mega trend, which is additive manufacturing. I'm sure you've all heard of 3D printing. So 3D printing is basically where instead of printing ink on paper, you print, let's say, plastic or metal or whatever it is, in layer by layer, and you actually build up a physical object just based on computer designs. And you can basically print anything these days. Again, this offers us the opportunity to put the end user, or the customer, or the user, whatever you want to call them, in your business chain, put the end user in charge. So instead of the end user having to submit a requisition and you have to source it and get it delivered and so on, the end user can just download the 3D file that they need and print it out on their desktop 3D printer. I think those are some plastic toys. Even doing it with medical stuff, printing out blood vessels and things. One of these days they'll be able to print out a replacement kidney, I'm sure. And there's a picture of the MakerBot Replicator, which is the most popular desktop 3D printer. So MakerBot, which is the most popular small home user type 3D printer, is now available on a retail level. It used to be a kind of a project thing. Now you can go to Home Depot in the United States and actually buy one off the shelf, ready to use. Not only that, they're also selling MakerBot's 3D scanner, which is about the same size. So it's got a 3D scanner, so you can take, let's say, a cup, you put it in the middle of the scanner, and it whizzes it around a few times, and then it feeds that information into your laptop, and then you print out a replica of the cup on your MakerBot Replicator. And you can change the color, change the size, shape, and then print it out again. So everything can be customized. The industrial impact of 3D printing goes way beyond making plastic toys and guns. This is a titanium wing spar made out of titanium powder printed by a 3D printer. And Airbus say that eventually they want to make an entire aeroplane by 3D printing. And in the future, perhaps we'll have printers that can print DNA. So if you want to fix your genes, you just email the cloud-based super agency that does this sort of thing, and then they'll just send you back a recipe to sort yourself out, and you just print it out on your bioprinter, and there you go, you've got a vaccine or something like that. The next mega trend is new energy. And new energy is the way that the energy paradigm is going to shift completely. It doesn't matter whether it's driven by climate change or just driven by simple economics. What is going to happen is that we are going to have ways of making energy that are far more effective, more powerful, and basically limitless compared to what we've got today. We're already seeing that solar power is coming down in cost and going up in efficiency very much in the same way that Moore's law works with computers. In other words, it's becoming cheaper and cheaper and getting more effective all the time. And things like nanotech are helping this to drive this trend. So within a decade, you will have enough solar power that you won't need to worry about oil and gas anymore. In California, it's already starting to happen where guys like Elon Musk, I'm sure you all know who Elon Musk is, right? If you don't, Google him immediately. He's an ex-South African who founded Tesla and SpaceX, and he's also got a company called Solar City. Now, Solar City, they put solar panels on your roof in California, and you don't have to pay for it. They put the panels on, and you just subscribe to it, and then they basically pay you back for the electricity that your solar panels provide and get fed back into the grid. So they're basically kind of renting your roof space for you. So that they've worked out a financial model. And this is working so well that they've now bought a Chinese company that manufactures new high-efficiency solar panels, and he's building a big factory in upstate New York to literally produce hundreds and thousands of gigawatts over the next decade. So what we're finding is that in the future, we will have what they call an energy internet. So instead of us relying on government, on Eskom, on central authority to provide the power we need, we will all have solar panels or something similar, and we will all feed into microgrids. We'll have the Internet of Things will give us smart power consumption. It'll know that I don't need electricity at the moment because I'm at a conference, I'm not at home. So any electricity I've got available from my panels or whatever will get fed to my neighbors or things like that. So we'll have not only smart consumption, but also smart production. Part of that Uber of energy, that Internet of Energy, is what we will eventually have, especially in the more free market countries. And so you've got companies like Honda are designing homes. Why? Because in the future, the electric cars are going to be part of a smart grid. So when you park your car at home, it must know that you've got excess solar. If it's in the daytime, you've got excess solar, so it'll power up the car. And then at night, when you need a bit of power, it'll see, now the car's battery's completely full. We'll just use a bit of power from the car to power your LED lights in the house. And the spin-offs from limitless, cheap energy in the energy internet will be things like hydrogen for fuel cells, clean water. You know, we can do desalination on a grand scale if you've got enough electricity. If you've got cheap electricity, you can produce clean water from seawater or from any kind of water very, very easily. So just to wrap up, to close the loop, we're going to, these megatrends kind of help each other. So from ubiquitous connectivity through to the Internet of Things, producing big data, which we need to be processed by artificial intelligence, which again helps us to make effective robotics, and that will accelerate the trend towards additive manufacturing, fully automated everything, and ultimately the energy internet. Because when you can produce solar panels on a 3D printer very, very cheaply, everyone will have as much solar panels as they need, and everyone will have more energy than they need. And that is the way that this whole tsunami of technology is going to completely change the way the world works. It'll be a new paradigm. Even our economics will have to change. So what I want to do is leave you with one final thought. What is the future? We don't know what the future holds, but we have got some ideas of what it might hold. I say the future is in our hands. The future is what we make of it. Thank you very much.